This coming week is a pretty special week in the regarding the history of our country. On Monday, this Monday, we'll be, if you want to call it, celebrating. I choose to say remembering 9/11. Now, who in here actually remembers 9/11? Like you, legit. I know, some of you guys, everyone's just like, okay, on the count of three, just out loud, say where you were when you realized it happened. On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Me too, alright? That's exactly where I was. That's exactly where I was. You're exactly right. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. Living in Atlanta. I was living with my sister at the time. My parents had another house back in Atlanta. My sister had been living in that ever since my parents moved in 1999 from there to Houston, down to Sugar Land. And so my sister had been living there, and I came over here with my parents in 99, went to HBU, Houston Baptist University, for a year, then went back to Atlanta because I was in a band, and I was like, maybe we can make this work, as I told you guys. We were awful, so that didn't last very long. And I remember I was going back to Kennesaw State University and studying for a business management degree. And, I woke up that morning. Everything was just like, it was the most normal day in the world. Woke up that morning, just hanging out, watching some Sports Center while I was getting ready. So I was going in from the bathroom, from where I was getting ready, and then going back out, and I hear a certain team, if it was the Texas Rangers or the Atlanta Braves highlights were coming on, or even Dallas Cowboys, whatever it was. I just remember going back and just going back and forth. And then all of a sudden, I remember on ESPN, they had this kind of like, all of a sudden everything stopped, and this special news brief came on, and this lady, she was kind of trembling and just in shock, it seemed like, just came on the screen. It was like the most unbelievable thing just happened. A plane has flown into one of the Twin Towers, and we don't know why, we don't know how, we don't know if it was a terrorist act or whatever, but we know that, there's smoke and fire billowing out, and man, they cut to some scenes from it. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable sitting there looking at it and watching the smoke and the fires billow out, watching people at the bottom of the building looking up in horror as, they just kind of see different people maybe hanging out, over the ledges from the windows. It was a tragedy. And then you have the announcers come on and say there are people hanging off from the windows, there are people, totally freaking out, and all of a sudden kind of moving other people jumping off, thinking that it'd be better to jump than to, die in this burning building and stuff. And then all of a sudden, you kind of see in the background, like you see like there's the picture of what's going on. All of a sudden it cuts to the picture and you see plane number 2 flying into the second Twin Tower. And your life's on pause. Your life is on pause. I just remember sitting there thinking to myself, this is like a bad dream. This is like one of those situations where, you go back, you get back in bed, you sleep for a little bit, you wake back up, and everything changes. And it's normal out, you're going to go to school, hang out. By that time, my school had been canceled because they figured out it was a terrorist that had done that. So all the schools, all the colleges around the country had been canceled. And I just remember sitting there, and so my best friend, gives me a call, Brian, I told you about last week, who was still friends with me after that whole fiasco. So a really good friend of Brian. He's like, come on to my house, man, let's just hang out and watch this. I was like, all right. So I went over there, hung out and watched it. Sure enough, while I was on my way over there, that's when the first tower fell. And, that's when you really heard the reports of people jumping out of the building, and then in the second building, then thinking the same thing. So people were jumping out of the second building knowing, that its fate was, going to rest in the same hands. And, it was just kind of one of those experiences where you will never ever forget. You will never ever forget where you were that moment, and then watching that stuff. It's just ingrained in your memory. It's imprinted in there forever. Forever. And I was thinking about that the other day, because there's going to be a lot of different types of celebrations / remembrances coming up. A lot of prayer vigils, a lot of news specials, all that type of thing is going to come up. And I was thinking to myself, the reason they're doing this is because they want to remember. They want to remember. And we should never forget what happened that day. We should never forget. It drives me nuts when I hear people today, or when I heard when President Bush, it was towards the end of his tenure in the White House, it drove me up a wall when I would hear people criticize him for people who were over in Iraq or Afghanistan or Pakistan or wherever they were, chasing down these terrorists who had come into our country and blown up our sky and killed hundreds and hundreds of people on our soil. It drove me up a wall to hear, they shouldn't be over there. They shouldn't be doing that stuff. Get them out of there. Do you guys know? And what was sad about that is that, there are thousands of Americans that died overseas in military action because President Bush did deploy them. But do you guys know, when you guys will go back and read history in 40 years when they let go of all these documents that are secret right now, I'm not going to get rid of them. But in 40 years or 40, whatever the time period is, and they let go of these things, do you guys know, you guys will understand and realize how many thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of lives in the United States and around the world the United States soldiers saved because President Bush deployed those soldiers overseas to save lives, more lives on our soil. Because if you guys are naive enough to think that they were just going to stop with 9/11 and not even try and come back over and do anything again, or do anything else overseas or anything else, you're a little crazy. It drove me up a wall. And so 9/11 comes around every year, and we remember it. We remember it. Why? Because it was a crazy time. It was a disgusting time in the history of the United States. A terrible time. A terrible time. And it's a time that we will never forget. So you know what? One day we ought to remember it. We ought to remember that we have freedom. We ought to remember that there are people out there that want to damage our lives just because you guys bear the name American. Just because of that. Not because of skin color, not because of race, not even because of religion necessarily, but because you guys bear the name American. There are people out there, and we need to remember that people gave their lives, that there are 1,800 symbols of that died in those two Twin Towers, and those two in the World Trade Center. It's a sad time. We remember that coming up. We remember that coming up. There are a lot of things in our lives that we remember. Not only 9/11, but there are things that help us remember that. Do you guys know on the place where the World Trade Centers were, where that was, there's a memorial there. There's a memorial there. What's the memorial there for? Yeah, to help them remember, right? To help them remember, Why do we celebrate Easter? Yeah, it's to what? Easter's there. It's a symbol. It's a day, it's a symbol to help us remember exactly what happened. A Savior came and died for us. He walked upon this earth the same way you and I did. He was tempted in the same way as you and I were and are tempted in. Yet He didn't get into any of them. Yet He carried all the sins, the weight of the world upon Him, and then walked and then crawled when He was too beaten to walk to that cross, sinless, and gave His life for you and for me. So Easter, Good Friday, which, good is kind of like a weird word to say it's good that Jesus died, but it's good that He died because He died in your place. He died in your place. So it's Good Friday through Easter Sunday, it's a day of remembrance. And we celebrate that weekend as a time to remember. What about Independence Day, July 4th? What are we remembering for that day? Yeah, well, okay, freedom from who? Freedom from tyranny. Freedom from who? Where? Britain. All the Brits. All of these dirty Brits. All right. Freedom from Britain. Freedom from tyranny of oppression, and freedom from people governing us from overseas that didn't even know about our lives. So we celebrate July 4th by blowing things up and putting fireworks and cats. And, just kidding, don't do that. But we celebrate by eating lots of awesome, we grill out, we flip hamburgers, it's just like a good old time, and all these things that we watch things blow up in the sky. There's nothing more American than watching things blow up in the sky, And that's what we do. We like that. We like explosions, right? Explosions, So, we like those things. We celebrate that day. You know what? There's also a symbol, you think about, there's also a symbol for trophies that people win. I remember in the 3rd grade, I won the spelling bee. I did school spelling bee.